Welcome to the RSP Film Room. I'm Matt Waldman with the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. Today we are going to take a look at Adrian Peterson, the Detroit Lion. Yes, for years past 3 to 4 years, I've said that Adrian Peterson's like a 57 Chevy with a souped up engine and a garage full of Miatas, because when he gets banged around, there's just a dent here and there that you can pop out on the scene and just keep on rolling. Whereas with all those Miatas out there, they take a hit and they're in the shop and probably totaled. He's just a different back. He's a throwback player. And we're going to show you what makes Adrian Peterson tick and be able to start for a team at the age that he is and still play at a high level. Maybe not the Hall of Fame peak levels that he once played at back in his day as a Viking. But man, the Detroit Lions version is still pretty damn good. We're going to watch it right here. This is a counter play. He's going to work behind that, press the outside, work back in. And we're going to talk about how he presses that, looking at the end zone view of this particular play. Now you're going to see the linebackers switch up, Roquan Smith and Danny Trevathan late in this play. After the motion, they're going to switch. There's the counter step to the right side. Right away, he's keying on Danny Trevathan, the middle linebacker here. And what he wants to do is to see where Trevathan's going to go. So he's going to look at Trevathan's hips and chest and look to see whether he can get him to open up. He presses to that outside block, that first pulling block by the guard, and takes a step outside. Once he takes that step, he sees Trevathan's committed. Trevathan's hips and knees and chest are all towards that guard pulling to the left side. Peterson takes one more step before he begins two quick transition steps to cut downhill and inside 59, where the lead back, who was pulling as well on that counter, makes the block. And now he's downhill. Great job. As he heads downhill, he sees the safety here. He can also feel the block and know that his tight end is worked up to the secondary here. He's going to bend towards that direction and away from the pursuit behind him. Probably feels that a little bit from where he was making that cut. Bends downhill, sets up that block, and then breaks downfield. Really nice job there. You just see understanding of patience within a gap scheme. There's things that you can still do to set up blocks and be patient, especially with a play like the counter and in the open field. This is going to be one of my favorite plays to analyze for you about Adrian Peterson, because what he does is kind of a dual-edged sword. He's earned a lot of rushing yards with this type of movement, but it's also something that, even as a future Hall of Famer, it's something that he can make better choices. And that just goes to show you that we're always learning, that players, as good as they are, can always get better. And here's Adrian Peterson here. He's going to press towards that strong side, and he's going to feel the pursuit all working to the inside. And he decides to make a jump stop and then a jump cut and flip those hips to get outside. And he gets 2 yards on the play. And listen, I mean, for a man his age to be able to make a dynamic jump stop and then make this dynamic jump cut and flip his hips in the air, land, and then accelerate and still be able to get 2 yards against 2 guys who are unblocked on this play, man, that's awesome. But the dual-edged sword is that Adrian Peterson could have gained more yards if he were more efficient. Instead of the jump stop, because you're going to see him take that little prep step, and now he's going to use his inside leg to make the jump stop. Instead of doing that, what he could have done is, when he takes that prep step, is that he could have taken one more small step with that inside foot instead of jump stopping, and then use his right foot on the next step after that to point the toe and work outside. More efficient movement. Instead of him jumping and being in midair, he's actually pointing. He has this foot on the ground and the right foot pointing outward. And instead of being into the line like this, he's actually about a yard to the right as opposed to into the line here. And in being a yard to the right, he will be about a yard ahead of where he is right now when he's bouncing outside from the penetrating defender from the second level. Doesn't have to stiff arm him because he's a yard ahead. And then he can focus on 52 and try and stiff arm 52 and work through that. Because if he does that, he's off into the secondary about a yard ahead with a blocker and a cornerback to face. So as dynamic and athletically impressive as this is, and Adrian Peterson has won a lot of yards with this, like I said, there's a time and place sometimes for this type of cut, and sometimes he lives and dies with this particular play, which is why you sometimes see feast or famine rushing outputs from him on a carry to carry basis. Here's another great example of where that efficiency could come in handy. You're going to see late pre-snap that the defense kind of works their way up at the beginning of the second quarter, and you see guys on the outside on each side of the line of scrimmage, and Adrian Peterson decides he's going to go to the weak side, even though there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players who are basically from the center over to the weak side, and maybe 6 if you count the cornerback outside of this trip set. He decides he likes the numbers advantage of the center. These basically 6 players that he has as potential blockers versus 6 players here, but it's really could be a 6-on-7 or a 6-on-6 depending on where the safety is. It doesn't seem like that's great in theory, but see, when you start questioning things in theory, you don't always have the practical experience of a back like Adrian Peterson. What Adrian Peterson knows is that these players on the outside are going to crash inside. They're going to crash down the line because he's taking a handoff from Stafford in a direction where he's going to be heading towards that strong side. So those guys are all coming in backside pursuit. He knows this. So he thinks, if I can get them crashing down the line, I can bounce this outside and have much more room to operate. That's practical experience over theory, folks. Now the problem with that is that he uses this jump stop once again. And he jump stops his way and turns direction directly into that down the line backside pursuit and gets wrapped up and runs into people. So what he's thinking about doing makes perfect sense. He has the diagnostic skills of a Hall of Famer. And that's what a Hall of Famer would do, is you take a look at the theory of all that and say, well, you know, the numbers advantage isn't there. But he knows the angles of where that numbers advantage is going to come from, or that numbers disadvantage is going to be. He knows the angles of where these guys are going, and he's going to work around that. But he just doesn't have the right tool in the toolbox in terms of his footwork. Because this one step here, the next step after that's the jump cut. And he wastes 2 yards because it takes that hop of 1 yard and then the lead step of the outside foot for a 2nd yard. And now he's too far inside to be able to make that turn around to the outside. Instead, right here, if he planted that foot in the ground and used his outside leg to point the toe outside where his hop step is, because see, again, watch it one more time. That step, if he planted there, that outside leg could take the point and turn at the 31. And now he's turning at the 31 instead of hopping into the 32. And because this defender's already committed down the line, instead of Adrian Peterson heading downhill into him, he would have his hips turned at the 31 and heading around. And then he could make his work around and up towards this lone safety and have a one-on-one with him, or at least be able to get a good 3 to 4 yards out of this play rather than losing one or not gaining anything at all. So it's about, again, efficiency of footwork. He lives and dies by this footwork, and that's why you get some of the feast or famine where he could be a little bit more efficient. Here's an example of Adrian Peterson feasting. 21-yard gain, I formation. And you can just see the patience in this run, especially from the end zone view. You can see his decision making at work immediately. Takes the exchange, and at the exchange point, you're diagnosing your first read. You see the linebacker flowing to the outside. He sees the double team that he has here, and he sees the flowing of the defender on 77. He sees all of that and understands what's there in front of him. So he gives a little peek to that backside where 45 is going to be working downhill, and he peeks at number 58. Is 45 going to be able to get there? No, 45 is going to peel off to try and help up this double team here that's getting split. So he takes one more step after he honors that inside look, slows that down. It forces the guys on the double team, or the guys who are on each of these inside blockers, 68 and 66, forces them to peek back to that inside. Now Adrian Peterson can work towards that outside, sees what's going on out here, sees the leverages to the outside, because he peeked that to that inside, they reacted inside. Now he's worked outside of them and can get downhill. And while he doesn't have the top speed that he used to have, you can see here, the patience, the understanding of reading through his options, exhausting his options. And watch how he uses his feet here, because he begins to slow down, turn his feet to the outside, and then cut downhill. So he doesn't get too close to the line of scrimmage on this type of run where maybe he heads to the perimeter a little bit. So a little bit of a hesitation, one step downhill. That's enough to get basically 58 to honor that. These two defenders on 68 and 66 to come back and look inside. And by that time, he's pointing the toe and turning to the outside. And that sets up the blocks inside for him to be able to work downhill. And listen, I think the NFL and NFL coaches sometimes probably read enough about the media that they start to believe things too, like, oh, Adrian Peterson can't catch the ball. Adrian Peterson's not much of a receiver. Adrian Peterson's not going to give you a lot in the passing game. The next thing you know, comes to a new team, and the defense is set up to think, yeah, they always have a scat bag with Adrian Peterson. Let's just drop back. Obviously, Matt Stafford on 1st and 10 is going to go way downhill here. Peterson, they just let leak out here. No one's within, 10 yards of him. Tracks that ball over his shoulder, makes the catch. Listen, he's not going to do Austin Eckler stuff for you. That's not Adrian Peterson's game. But a check down receiver can always be a check down receiver. He's had high reception counts over the years as a check down receiver. He can track the ball over his shoulder. He can catch it with his hands and head downhill. He can square up and catch the ball. I've seen him do that earlier in this game. He had multiple receptions in this game. Actually was 3 for 3 in terms of targets for 21 yards, and this 9-yard gain, was probably one of the better ones. So if you're going to honor everybody in the vertical game, you're going to leave Adrian Peterson in the open field. Have fun with that. 8-9 yards, pretty easy. All right, more living and dying with the jump stops and jump cuts. When is it appropriate to do a jump stop? Why is it so effective for Adrian Peterson, for him gaining chunks of yards? Well, you're going to see it on this particular play, because there's that little jump stop, and then he gets downhill, and he earns 10 yards on this run. Part of the reason is that when you're going to make a cut one gap over, when you can make a jump stop and you have defenders keen on you behind your lead fullback, they're all working towards that fullback on the inside here. Meanwhile, you've got blockers who are going to be able to push these guys down further to the inside, and that's going to open up this backside crease. And it's only going to be one gap over. So when Peterson can make a jump stop like this and plant further inside, that action looks like he's just accelerating even more downhill for the briefest second before they actually realize that he's cutting to that backside and getting downhill. And you can see it a little bit better from the broadcast view here. See that stop there? You can just see there's forward shifting momentum that kind of fools you into thinking that he's accelerating downhill when he's actually accelerating into a stop to bend it back just one gap over and then reaccelerate downhill. So sometimes, that jump stop is really effective in giving you the impression that you're heading downhill in a direction when you're actually about to bend it back. That's why it's so effective for Adrian Peterson. This is a great play to show you where Adrian Peterson is now in his career and contrast it with where he once was. Where he is now is a competent NFL starter, maybe a good NFL starter at the running back position relative to other backs in the league who are 8 to 10 to 12 years younger than he is. And you're going to see it here. You're going to see him do a nice job of being able to head to that outside, press that outside lane, cut downhill through his lead blocker behind it, and then he's going to try and bend it, and he's going to bend it around this backside block and try and work backside here across, and he gets caught from behind. All right. Still a very nice play. But what I want you to notice is where Adrian Peterson used to be is after he'd do all this stuff to the line of scrimmage and get through the line of scrimmage right here. What Adrian Peterson is thinking He's thinking, man, back in my day, back when I was like perennial all-pro player, back when I was it at the running back position, I would bend this run behind 59, behind and around 33, and I'd be weaving my way across the Lions symbol here at midfield and up the left flat for, a 60, 70-yard touchdown. And you can see he's thinking it. He plants right here. He's thinking, can I make this cut around here? Because if I can whirl around backside here, I've done this against the Chicago Bears at least 3 or 4 times in my career when I was a Viking. But he makes that second step, and he's like, I just don't have the bend. Don't have the hips. Can't make the acceleration cut to be sharp enough to get behind these guys. Just can't do it. He tried for it, though. Couldn't do it. So he's like, all right, take that next step. Let me work around it instead. Works around it. Tries to cut around here. But by that time, the backside defender's caught up, and he's wrapped. So you can see that Adrian Peterson, in his mind, he's still that 24-year-old immortal stud who can bend this run right here. And if he does that, he probably has about, back in his day, he'd be at this hash right now, and 50 wouldn't have caught him because he would have cleared that, and 50 would just be chasing, and telling his coach that he gave the best effort he could on Monday's film session. But now, he's just merely a mortal NFL starter and has to work around like this and make a pretty nifty play out of it. But I wanted to show that to you because when you say Adrian Peters lost something, yeah, he's lost something. But what he lost was that extra magic dust that he had, because he wanted to make that. He wanted to make that cut behind his blocker here, and it was like, oh, can't do it. So there you go, Adrian Peterson for you. Still at his ripe old age, outplaying, first round draft picks or early round draft picks at running back. And why? He's powerful. He has excellent vision. He still has better stamina than most football players in the league. He still makes sharp cuts, and he has all those years of running back knowledge and how to set players up. And yeah, he could be a little more efficient from time to time with his footwork, but that's never really been his game. And when your game has been in demand this long and has led to good work, that you can come in, after getting released by Washington and start for Detroit against the Chicago Bears defense and nearly gain 100 yards in rushing alone and over 100 yards in total offense, you can do it your way. Thanks again for watching. For more RSP Boiler Room videos, you can check out my YouTube channel, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, and my site, www.mattwaldmanrsp.com.